Hey everybody, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I'm in here prepping for a series of videos I'm going to do where I'm going to test the pull-out strength of different lure hook eyes. But in the middle of it, I realized it's going to be a while before I'm ready for it. It occurred to me that I've been using this eye driver for a while, and it's real handy, real easy to make. So I thought I'd go ahead and make a video on how I make these. So let's go out to the main shop and do some hacking. So what you'll need is a bolt or some piece of round metal stock, something that preferably isn't hardened, something that's not too strong so that you can cut into it, because you do have to cut a slot. Now I've got this stud which works really easily because I don't have to cut the head off a bolt, which is what you'll need to do if you've got just a bolt. So the diameter of this little stud bolt that I'm using is just around 3/10 of an inch, or about 7.5 millimeters. Now what you need to know is that it needs to be big enough on the inside of the threads to handle the screw eye diameter that you're going to be using. So this is going to work just fine. You don't need it very long. This one's about 2.5 inches, but anything over 1.5 inches should do the trick. So your first step is going to be to cut that slot. Now that's probably the most difficult part of the whole process, and if you can see, there's a little bit of a ridge formed by the machining when they made these threads. I'm going to go ahead and file that down with a bastard file, just so that everyone who's got just hand tools can see how it can be done. Put it into this vise, tighten my little vise down a little bit so it's not moving in either direction. And you want to work against your jaws, right? You don't want to work in that direction because it'll tend to move. So I'll get a file, and remember that a bastard file cuts on the forward stroke, so that's where you put your pressure on. So it should only take just a few quick. Okay, so that's pretty smooth, pretty flat. It's going to be easy for me to get that cut in. Okay, so the next step is to cut that slot, and the tricky part is the fact that this is relatively thick stock, right? So you've got to get a pretty good thick cut. So if you've got one of these, this angle grinder with a cutoff blade, then you're styling. But again, I'm taking for granted that most of you don't have those kind of power tools. So you'll need a hacksaw. This is a really cheapy one I've had for like 25 years. And you'll need one with a blade that is designed for cutting steel. This one's 32 teeth and it's 12 inches long. You'll just need to get the right length for your hacksaw. If you don't have a hacksaw, go get one. It's just one of those things you gotta have. The trick, and the only trick in this whole thing, is really that you need to use two blades so you can get the kerf thickness. So you're adding the blade thickness to the blade thickness you have. So you'll have to loosen it up. Now remember, same thing applies to these blades. They only cut forward. You've got to match the length, and you've got to match the tooth count, so you don't mismatch these things, and otherwise they won't cut right. So I'm just going to put the second one on here, and it just slips on right onto the little blade hooks, and then I'm just going to tighten them down. Now you've got the right thickness. You can see how much thicker that is. Again, the trick is to cut perpendicular to your jaws, get it centered up, and just don't put much pressure on it. Just get it going nice and slowly. The idea is to have lots of patience at the beginning of this, just to get it going. Once you got a good slot worked, it'll hold the blade in place, and you can put a little more effort into it. You can see the slot starting to form, and it's plenty fat enough for that. You just need to go deep enough so you can grab the whole head of this screw eye. Okay, so that should do it. And you can see it's just the right depth. Next step is to clean this up a little bit. I want to take away all these sort of sharp edges, clean it up just a little bit, and I'll show you a little trick on how to do that nice and uniformly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mount this bastard file in my vise jaws, nice and firmly, not too hard. And I'm going to use this as my grinding surface. Now, if you've got a grind wheel, which I do, and I normally would use it, you can use this technique with your grind wheel, or you can just use it on sandpaper. But this works pretty good. So you want to put it in the chuck of your drill. If you don't have a drill, go get one. Just another one of those things you've got to have. Remember, the file blade actually cuts in when it's cutting in that, when it's getting pushed in that direction. So that means this is the direction it cuts it. The reason you need to know which way it cuts is because you need to have your drill turning it against the direction of cut. So that means this is going to have to go counterclockwise. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this down on a little bit of an angle and start cutting. Okay, so you can see I put a little taper in it, and that's going to make it easier for the next step. Okay, so now for the final step. And this is really the simplest of the steps, but you will need something you may not have, actually. You may not have one of these nice handy-dandy assortment packs of springs, but I highly recommend you get one if you're a handy guy or a handy gal and like to repair things and build things. It's really nice. These things will get you out of a jam. Or you can just go get a spring from your hardware store that fits the diameter of your bolt. And it doesn't have to be a strong spring. Actually, a very light spring works really well. The spring is just a sleeve. It's all it does is create a sleeve around the slot so you can get the hook eye in there and have it not come out when you're driving it or pulling it out. Another option, if you don't want to go and buy a spring, you can use a little plastic tube or an oversized straw like this one, and just slide it on, and you can just kind of thread it in and then cut it off with a pair of scissors, and it'll work just fine. It just won't last very long. So the reason for the taper is two things. One, it's easier to get this section of spring on there, but mostly it's to hide that final little piece of cut spring so that when you thread this spring on here, you can thread it to the point where this little cut sharp edge can be screwed back onto that taper and be hidden back there so that it doesn't hit your lure at any time. And now you have a nice driver where this fits in there nicely. The spring holds it pretty nicely, and it goes in and out pretty easily. It doesn't just fall out on you, and of course makes life a lot easier especially if you're doing a lot of lures. Well, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, certainly subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. If you got an idea for a video, hey, offer it up. Put it in the comments. I would love to hear it. And comment anyway. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you on the next video.